Hey guys, welcome back to the Believe, Be Real, Be Bold podcast. I am on location at the Center for Shared Insight with Dr. Kristen HIck. How are you?
Well, thank you. Excited to be here.
I absolutely love coming on location because of the authenticity and the connection that we have in person versus Zoom is great, but it's just not quite what really kind of connects and jives and the vibe that we get between us is like so much better in person. So thank you very much for the invitation to come in.
Yes.
We're like in the heart of Denver.
Yes, we are. Very central.
And how is it and why is it that you chose this as your career path and your passion?
Well, I, like many therapists, was trained to be a generalist. So to basically be able to treat anyone who walks through the door. The problem with that is that it really speaks to no one in particular. So getting out of group practice and getting away from community mental health, which was my first part of my career, I wanted to build a private practice and have been in private practice for the last 6 years and really decided, like, who am I most passionate about? And I came to realizing that, like myself, there are a lot of people out there that were not taught how to have healthy relationships. So I think we can all think back and what were the early messages that we learned from our parents and the people around us about what it was like to relate to one another, how it was to resolve conflict, what it was like to have boundaries, or did the word boundaries even exist in our families? Most of us
Not likely, yeah.
And so, and then, getting into my adulthood, realized that I was running into some dating pitfalls over and over and over, and sought counseling, and so, like, I have to break this pattern. I know I've learned something that has to be unlearned. And so through a lot of work, and then a lot of work professionally, really dove into how is it that we learn these patterns, and how can we unlearn them? I've been studying attachment style my whole professional career, so the last 13 years. My dissertation's in adult attachment, and I'm so excited that it's gotten so much popular these days, because now it's like in the mainstream and we can talk about it. And so that's a large part of the practice, is like understanding your attachment style and how does that play into your relationships, where do you learn that and develop that, and then how is it playing out right now and how can we change that?
That's definitely why we connected, because like we both have a passion and an interest in attachment theory, and I love the fact that it's getting so much attention, because it could be the root of why we're seeing patterns arise in relationships. And who is it that comes to you most often, and do they all have questions about attachment, or is it something that you have to explain and guide them through in?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people come with some questions about attachment because they've read our blogs, or they've seen our social media and they see that we blog a lot about it, or we're talking a lot about it, or they've read Amir Levine's and Rachel Heller's book Attached, or I think Stan Tacton does a book on attachment as well. So, like, it's being written about in a way that is user-friendly, it is relatable, so people are finding out more about it. The people who come to our practice are usually mid to late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And I say, like, for different reasons. So, like, the 20s age group are, like, starting to think about, like, how their early childhood affected them and what they're seeing crop up in their dating relationships. 30s, why am I not finding the right partner? I want to settle down. I want to start a family. Why do I keep dating the same person and I'm unhappy?
Why did their first one not work out and now they're back in the dating pool?
Yes, so they've been through one divorce, and they want to get it right this time. Or they're in their 40s and 50s and have divorced later on and are trying to recreate or create for the first time a new kind of relationship. So that's usually who's coming to us, is either on the one side of dating, in the midst of marital distress, or recovering from.
And the 20s age group is getting a lot of like negative press and a lot of flack for maybe some of their behaviors, but I have a lot of respect for that age group because they are making the decision to date and get married later. They're holding off as a group. Yes, right?
Yes.
So their awareness, like you were talking about, of like their understanding what their childhood had in play with now why they delayed so much and why they might not be connecting with a potential partner as well as they would like.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of respect for that age group.
Yes. I mean, the thing I'll say I say a lot of things in therapy, and most often my clients don't really listen to me. They're like, but you're the therapist saying that. Whatever, I'm going to do this thing. One of the
Can you give me an example? Because
oh yeah, I have certain rules that I try to get clients to follow, because I think from my perspective they allow for, like you were talking about last week, intimacy to develop at the right stage, the right time, right? So like one of mine is no sex until 6 dates or 6 weeks, whatever comes later.
Okay.
Minimum.
Because we can't rush through 6 dates in 2 weeks and whichever comes first.
Exactly, because some people will, and there's a trap there too, right?
Like an attachment.
Exactly. But if you give it time to develop, you see things start to unfold. Now that might be too early for some people too, and that's okay, but we're talking about people that usually rush into that decision making. We want to slow it down a little bit, so they have time to look at things a little differently. And that is not a very popular
I can understand why.
rule.
It would definitely land with me, because that's something that I can totally buy into. I'm a busy business owner, and I love the flexibility in my life, but I really do only have one date time frame available per week. Maybe. I mean,
most people do.
I definitely would make time for a second, but as it starts in the beginning, once a week is great for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it needs to take the right pace. If you hurry the pace, like anything in life, you hurry it, you rush it, it's not going to have the same result that you want. The other one is don't go to each other's homes. Minimum third or fourth date.
Okay, I
No
can buy into
Netflix and
that
chill.
too. Sure.
Now this is I should go back to reframe. This is depending on what is your goal for your relationship. If you're
intentions,
right,
yeah.
If your intention is just a date around and have something casual, and both of you are cool with that, and you're looking for a situationship, awesome.
Yep, sure.
The rule doesn't really apply in the same way. If you're fooling yourself to thinking that's all you want, or you want something more, you have to slow the process down. And people's space is an intimate space, right? Seeing what pictures they have on the walls, seeing how they decorate their bedroom, seeing how they are in their environment, that's intimate. And so it should come later as they're slowing this down. So that's one of them. I forget there was another one I was going to say, but it's not coming to me.
We can circle back to it,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm all about boundaries. I definitely, as a general rule, don't kiss on the first date, because I need to kind of sleep on it. And we were just talking before we hit record about intuition versus that sensory on the Myers-Briggs, and until I really became more self-aware and conscious of who I was and what my safe place is and my boundaries are, I was just here or there, or kind of living in this life of chaos. And coming back to the millennial generation, or the Zennials right after that, the late 20s. And
I don't think I've ever actually heard that term before, Zennials.
The Zennials is right after millennial.
Huh, I like
so they
that.
might be turning 20, 21 nowadays. And they might be coming to you because they don't know why they've never really started a relationship, or they don't know why casual's not working out for them anymore, or the situationship. I love that word because it's very descriptive.
Did not come up with it, by the way.
No, of course not.
Borrowed it from somewhere.
Sure. So that age group is coming to you, and maybe they're starting a brand new relationship while they're seeing you. That's a great place for your role to come into play, to guide them through the first few dates.
Yes.
However, there's other people who come to you in the midst of a relationship, and they've got questions too.
Right. So they run the gamut. It's I really think that great relationships are created. They don't just you don't just happen upon them. We aren't taught how to have these great relationships. So you start with what are your intentions? What is your attachment style? Then we need to figure out what your intentions are based on what your attachment style is. And I love getting into that with clients. I think it's something that's really easy to understand. I don't know if you wanted me to kind of share a little bit about attachment style.
Yeah, absolutely. That's totally why we're here. And from my perspective, I was avoidant attachment, and then I really started to work through the self-awareness and the personal discovery to understand why relationships either got to 3 months and ended, or 3.5 years and ended. Because we were talking about that a little bit at the Shrinks and Drinks event.
Open house.
Yeah. And so I went through that process of self-awareness, found out that avoidant actually resonated with me most, and I was actually able to move closer to secure most of the time. And that's why we're here.
I identify with it a lot because as I started to learn this, I call it like I'm like a former anxiously attached person, like a recovering anxiously attached person, right? So like it's on a continuum. It's not usually this, that, or the other, although I think it's really talked about that in the literature and research. I see it as more fluid, and based on who you're interacting with, you may display certain qualities differently. And so I do think, and that's the reason I do my job, is that I think you can earn security. So you can come closer to demonstrating a secure attachment when you're with loved ones, partners, etc. And that's my goal, is to teach people how to be more secure.
So you're saying there's hope.
There is absolutely hope, and I've seen it with clients, and they don't believe me, but I'm like, but wait a minute, you used to do this, and now you do this. Oh, okay, I know, I see the change now. So for those who are a little new to attachment, I'll kind of give you a very brief intro into it. And that is that, you know, we form this relationship with our caregivers early in life, mom and dad, parents, and based on how warm and responsive they are to our needs for care, nurturance, food, affection, then we learn to kind of anticipate that other people will generally be like that. So if we have someone who's very warm, very responsive, very attuned to our needs, we develop a sense of self that like worthy of people meeting our needs, and that we expect that people generally will. And we have a flexibility about us going in the world, like, okay, we can handle some distance and we can handle some closeness. It's kind of an easy come and go of that. And you grow up to have adult relationships that feel that way. There's an easiness with the closeness and the distance. Those who have parents who are predictably unreliable for whatever reason, maybe they traveled a lot, maybe they had medical issues, maybe they had substance abuse or mental health issues, they're predictably unresponsive to the needs, the child's going to eventually say like, hey, I got me. I don't want to depend on you anymore. You guys consistently fail you. And this is an infant's mind, so probably not all those words. But
those
like,
are all innate kind of learnings.
Yes.
Yeah.
They learn, I've got to get me in this world. Like, I can't depend on anyone else to get my needs met. And so they grow up being really self-reliant, independent, which gets a lot of praise and award in our culture, where like you look like you got it all together, but inside you're not getting some needs met.
Feeling a little alone.
Yeah. And that people aren't safe to really let in for any length or any vulnerable depth, right? And so then that's what your relationships feel like. People are kind of always a little bit at the distance. You can get close, but as soon as it gets vulnerable or too close, I need to get my space. Then we have people whose parents were unpredictably reliable. They never knew if they were going to be there or they weren't going to be there. Again, for mental health reasons, medical reasons, parents' own trauma, whatever. It could be a lot of different reasons. But the child learns, I need to stay close to this person, otherwise I might not survive emotionally, physically, otherwise. So they cling. So that's what you see in adult relationships when they grow up, thinking, if I don't stay near my partner, like in contact with them, seeing them all the time, I might crumble. I might not be able to take care of myself, in so many words.
And you're describing the anxious attachment style there.
Yes.
And the previous one was avoidant.
Yes.
And then secure, you were talking about first. Like,
yes.
Yeah, the parents were reliable and they were attentive to physical, emotional, and mental needs.
Right.
And it was a different rearing or a different upbringing for each of those three.
Right. And I should say that it can be possible to change over life. It's relatively stable, but that used to be the thought that it was stable no matter what across the lifespan. Then they started to do some more research on what can change it. You know, having a secure attachment figure like a grandmother or a nanny or a child care provider step in can provide some of that security that you can like take on, you can borrow. Therapy is a good way to do that. So having a long-term relationship, 6 months or more, with a therapist, consistent weekly therapy, you can work to earn some of that, borrow some of that security and develop it yourself. and doing personal work. So it's not an end-all and be-all, like you're doomed from the beginning. Although I really believe that even if you earn some security, you go closer to the middle, if we're calling it the middle, you're always going to kind of have a default position. So when really pressed, you might still kind of revert, but over time you've been working on this less and less. So you might go, hey honey, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I need to go and just take a drive. So you still need a distance, but you're communicating in a secure way. So it might
letting
look
them
different.
know that you'll come back as well.
Exactly.
And setting the intention for yourself that I'll go away for just a short period of time, but I'm coming back.
Yes.
To address this. So some people might call that triggering, like triggering, and then they need to like bail. And when that decision is so definitive that like, oh, I got triggered, I'm out. Say like 2 or 3 dates in, not willing to resolve conflict, not willing to take personal ownership and face their partner in a time of where like a question comes up. I hate the term deal breakers. I hate the term red flags, but it's real.
Yes, they
deal
are.
breakers might fall in line with like smoking.
Right.
That just doesn't fit my lifestyle.
Right.
Yeah, we're not going to like the same things because you can't go for a hike at 14,000 feet, So we live in Colorado. We're spoiled.
Right.
Smoking doesn't fit in my lifestyle, so that's a boundary.
Right.
Not a deal breaker, just a boundary.
Right. But what I commonly see with those who have more of an anxious or an avoidant attachment style is that they come up with more deal breakers or red flags than the average person, right? So things become, the deal breakers become a way of defending against getting close to someone, right? So if you find that you are doing that, that's a sign, like why do I need to set up all these barriers to someone? Like smoking, yes, that they don't work in finance. Maybe as a defense.
It's a really good point.
Right?
And it's like the avoidant is like, I like a lot of things about this person, but.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what they're doing is they're creating this distance between themselves and their potential partner.
Yes. I hear that a lot with more avoidantly attached people where I like this person, but, or kind of superficial things will kind of get them caught off guard or stuck on things, and they'll...
Like he doesn't drive a truck.
Yeah, they'll build a story about it and like how it's not going to work. Or with more anxiously attached people, I hear, this is a common phrase I'll say, like if you're doing this, that's a clue for you, is the well maybes. Well, but maybe if he gets this new job, then that's going to happen and he'll be closer to me, we'll be able to spend more time, maybe he'll be more consistent. Well, when he gets through when she gets through this project at work, then we'll be able to spend more time together. Those well maybes are your way of convincing yourself that it might change, when that may just be what actually is the natural, their preference or comfort with closeness or distance, right? So you have to really learn, like, what defenses are you setting up, and also what excuses are you making to go around the things that actually might be there and just might not work for you.
Because you have no boundaries.
Right.
Or it might have something to do with underlying lack of self-confidence or worth, and like I'm not able to stand up for myself on these well maybes because I just don't feel it about myself first. Right.
Well, and that's not to get like too psychological, but that's sort of the plight of someone who's more anxiously attached, is that because they haven't developed this separate sense of self, because they've had to maintain the closeness to their caregiver to get their needs met, they haven't been able, they like mold themselves to get their needs met, right? Because that's been their way of getting their needs met.
Sure, it's part of their identity. It's a big part of that.
Right. So sure, where do you want to go to dinner? I'm good with anything, right? Whatever you want, you pick, right? And that's fine once in a while.
So is that an anxious attachment that's kind of like the people pleaser, or the...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we might see that, like, it's not that they don't have a preference, it's that they don't want to own the preference.
Or rock the boat. Because they want to mold to whatever the other person wants, but the other person's not going to really want that. They want someone who's a little more decisive, or that they don't always have to be making all the decisions. So when I work with people who are anxiously attached, I really work with them to show up.
Like, show up with their needs. Show
and
up.
as an individual?
Yes. Even if it, like, literally comes down to, like, when someone asks you what you want for dinner, at least name 3 things.
Cool.
Like, you don't have to make all the decisions, but show up with what you like and you don't like. Because that's really vulnerable for them. It's really vulnerable to show up because it risks that maybe they won't like it. And then what's that going to do? It's going to cause the fear, and they don't want the fear. They want to maintain the closeness. So it's my work is about practicing and titrating up in the practice a little bit at a time.
It's really good advice. So in kind of moving, I like to think of attachment style as pendulum.
Yes.
Like you can
yes.
swing from secure in the middle, like you said, to anxious on one side and avoidant on the other. And I visualize that this pendulum has some magnetic force to it, and there's a polarity. Like when an anxious and an avoidant come together in a relationship, we have polarity there. And they can go to the far end of the extremes, or say, in this example, we could talk about anxious and avoidant together, and then an anxious and a secure, and an avoidant and a secure, and see that polarity swing back and forth on the pendulum. So let's start with avoidant and an anxious attached coming together in a relationship.
It's like kryptonite. Like, it's just like they will find themselves together. Like, and it's
totally subconsciously, they're just drawn to each other.
Totally subconsciously. But you know what? That's the thing. It's not just a subconscious drawing. It's a neurochemical response that's going off in their brains. That's what it is. Like, it starts before the unconscious thought. It is the way that they learned, their neurology, their neurophysiology developed really young in life to expect and be what was reinforced, right? And so it is happening on a neurochemical level when you meet that the anxious meets the avoidant and vice versa, that they have this neurochemical response. Now, I know we all love chemistry.
Pop, pop, fizz, fizz.
Oh my goodness, we all love chemistry. That chemistry, that intense chemistry, when someone comes in saying, oh my God, that was just like, finally someone like I feel that with, like I've never felt that way before. I'm like, uh-oh. Because this is what's going on. It's a neurochemical response that when that subsides and the vulnerability gets in, they're going to freak out.
Is that right around 3 months?
2-3 months.
2-3 months. Why is that?
It's because, like, so, like, back up. So everything is, like, new and exciting in the first part, right? You, like, promises of, like, yeah, it'd be so nice to go do that with you. Wow, I can really see something with this person when you're, like, in the infatuation phase. Like, it's all just neurochemicals, like, going off in your brain, right? And you're feeling more and more close to this person, and then 2 or 3 months you start to like get into regular rhythms of dating them, right? So things aren't quite as exciting, they shouldn't be. And then also all those promises of like, we're gonna go do this, that you can't always hold them up, right? And so then there's like the person who called you or texted you so many times a day, well, that's just like going to eventually fade a little bit. But the avoidantly attached person is going to start to need the distance, because it's like they only can do so much, right? That's their comfort zone, so they start to pull away. Just as the other person, the anxiously attached person,
starts to draw closer.
Yes, because they're like, man, I'm really feeling this, and I don't want this person to leave. I got to hold on tight. And so you have this clashing of, one needs distance, one needs more proximity to the person, closeness, and it's just...
For the first 3 months, the anxious attached is like people pleasing, and they're like, "Oh, you need space? Okay, I can totally give you space."
Totally works for me.
And then at 3 months, they're like, "Well, I've given them so much space, and I've shown them so much love for this amount of time. Why aren't they coming closer to me? Let's cling. Let's draw closer. Let's physically, mentally, and emotionally draw closer." And then the avoidant, for the first 3 months, is like, "Oh, they're giving me space. I actually am heard by this person. My needs are getting met because I have that distance and that space and those boundaries." And now all of a sudden those boundaries are becoming threatened, and that's why the avoidant pulls away at that time. That was classic me as an avoidant. And then the more time that I spent by myself after a relationship ended, the better that actually got.
Oh yeah, you have more time to work on getting to a good baseline, and that's, I mean, this is another rule. Like, I don't have a time limit, but like, don't date after divorce for
a while,
a year or more.
Maybe, yeah.
I know that's a lot. Right? People, it's not a very
disagree.
Popular
right.
rule. But
I don't disagree, but I know that our listeners are going to be like,
I know. And the thing is like, I say that, and then what happens is that they go out and date, and then we learn about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like you're not going to be doing learning during that time when things don't go perfectly when you start to date someone new. You're going to be learning, and I think if you approach it like that, you're going to get something out of it, even if it's not really the person you're going to be with long term.
Totally agree with that.
Because you're still working through some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But if you take it as a learning experience, having a coach or having a therapist to kind of guide you through it, go, okay, what are you noticing here? Okay, could you practice this? Oh, what are you noticing? Could you practice that? Then you're still doing the work.
I love the check-in principle of like, where are you at on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? What's your gut, your mind, and your heart telling you the day after a date or the day before a date, which is really important too. For
are they feeling stirred up? Or are they feeling like
really
easy?
Comfortable with it? And I do have a really good friend who went through a divorce recently, and she wants to ask me for my advice, and my advice is, honey, don't date. Like, I know outside looking in right now, I see the turmoil, I see the hurt, I see the pain. Please promise me you're not dating right now. So she'll reach out and talk to me about a date she had. Like, just be patient.
Yes.
Meet her where she's at. Continue to give her strong advice, and just be there when she needs it. But like, I don't want to see the train wreck for a friend.
Yeah, of course. Well, the thing is like, you know, I run a women's divorce recovery group, and so I talk about like dating after divorce and when is the right time, and really trying to encourage them to take time. But they go out because there's a need to feel better, right? To feel wanted, to feel better, to feel desired, to have fun, to have a distraction from whatever we're going through. But what can happen is that then you have a mishap or an obstacle, it doesn't go the way you think, you get ghosted, and then you feel worse. So it sort of compounds the original experience of, I don't feel good about myself. And so if you can sit with that, I don't feel good with myself, until you feel better, you're not going to be as susceptible to that second, like, nailing of feeling. You know?
I totally understand. I totally agree with that. 100%. Resiliency and self-awareness and knowing your intentions and your boundaries are so important. And I know that my listeners always tell me, Dave, you're just guarded and you're trying to prevent hurt. Well, that's a legitimate scenario that you just painted for somebody who's out of a relationship and getting back out there for the first time, maybe too quickly, too soon. And that's a very concerning thing as a friend looking at somebody you love.
Yeah. Or even seeing, you know, people do harm to others when they're not ready, right? It's not even, sometimes it's them getting hurt, but sometimes it's them doing the hurt.
Hurt people hurt people.
Yeah. So like, if you're not in a good emotional space, that's what you might be putting out there. If you're feeling indecisive about what you want, it might be a setup for the other person that feels in a really healthy space, and you're kind of wishy-washy and I'm not sure, and you know, then you're doing harm to them too. So it's not just you don't want to get hurt, like you don't want to hurt anyone else either. That's what I call like bad date karma.
Sure,
you know?
and if you're not conscious of that, that's an even more cause and need for a check-in with yourself, like a check-in with your counselor, a check-in with your therapist. You encourage weekly visits, and I spent about almost a year doing weekly visits with my counselor, and it was enormously transformational. And then we were able to back off. Oh yeah, absolutely. Hannah, she's Team Dave all the way, and she listens to my stories. Sometimes I think she's checking the clock for, you know, whatever, like, is Dave done yet? But I joke with her about that, because I'm paying attention too, Hannah. Anyways, I was going to ask you to move from the anxious and avoidant kind of really drawn together in kryptonite to what happens when a secure person is introduced to an anxious person, and then we can talk about that situation with the avoidant too.
Right. Well, that's kind of the ideal situation for the anxiously attached person.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
It's also, if we were to have, avoidant and secure, it's ideal for the avoidantly attached person because they're gaining so much, or they can gain if they're really being present with it, from that other person's security, right? And so it might feel really foreign, and actually with anxiously attached people, they'll come in and what sounds like to me they've been on a date with a securely attached person, and they'll usually say it feels kind of boring.
There was no fireworks whatsoever.
No spark. Meh. It was okay. He's
Yeah.
nice. She's nice. But I don't see it going anywhere. I'm not my long-term person. All those statements.
They make a snap judgment and an instant judgment,
Yes.
and then they're like, let me just ride it out. There wasn't instant chemistry.
But there shouldn't be.
Not necessarily, no.
Right? Like the chemistry is a warning sign for the old dynamic. So if we pay attention to that, it's not like we want to feel like no attraction to the person. If you have some attraction but you don't feel a spark, the spark can develop.
Absolutely.
Right? As you get to know the person. So I say, if you're feeling that, which, again, this is a lesson I think people have to learn over and over and over.
On their own, at their
right.
pace.
Right. May not happen during the time that I'll be seeing them, but when I can get them to give the person a chance, they're like, oh, I'm starting to feel something. But it can feel really weird at first because, right, you've been taught your whole life, your last 30 years plus minus, how to relate to people. It's going to feel really different. It's not going to feel as exciting.
It won't feel like familiar.
Yes,
right.
It won't.
And that's a really another place to check in with when you're meeting new people. Oh, it feels really familiar.
Yes.
Well, you're drawn to the familiarity
Yes.
of what your attachment,
Yes.
your childhood was teaching you as attachment for relationships later on in your life.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's, we don't want familiar. We
No.
want new. We
Yeah, we
want
do.
different. We want, oh, well, I didn't know I was attracted to that before now. That's new. We want to seek that. So that's kind of a presentation I gave a long time ago. Was like dating outside your box, right? It's like writing down what is in your box. What is your typical person, your typical date, where your go-to spots, because everyone has their go-to date spots, right? And figure out how you're going to do it differently. Like, who is that person? What would they look like if they were different from your usual? What you're usually like, yes, that's who I'm attracted to. If you walk into a bar or a social situation, you're like, the person you immediately go to visually, we don't want that. We want you to do something different, right? So you figure out, like, what are those new spots, new activities, new things you could be doing, and that's when you're going to get out of the familiar, which is, that trap.
Yeah, a danger zone for us to be aware of, for sure.
Right. Well, the thing is that it's getting clear on your unconscious and your stated goal, right? Your stated goal is, I want to be in a long-term partnership, but your unconscious goal might be, actually, I want to stay safe. So you're going to stay safe by staying with the familiar. And that is okay. That's part of what therapists are there for, is to help you work through why that feels unsafe. Of course, it feels unsafe to get close to someone who could actually meet your needs. You have no idea what that is. That's completely foreign. So it's okay to wrestle with, I want this, but I'm scared of it. I want this, but I'm scared of it, which is the whole dynamic for someone who is insecurely attached, right? So getting clear on that, and then actively trying to practice something different. It's a lot of practice. I mean, I'm not a behavioral therapist, but I find myself being a behavioral therapist saying, I want you to go practice this. I want you to do a little experiment. Like, how you feel when you're dating that person versus that person. You learn so much.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So that is a piece of advice that I got along the way, being single for almost 2 years. The other really good piece of advice that I got about that first date and feeling chemistry or not is your intention on the first date is really only just to determine if you want a second.
Yes, I hear you say that, and I'm like, yes. It's not whether you have a spark. It's, would you be okay going on a second date?
Do you want to learn more about this person? That's it. Like,
are you curious to see what more might be there?
Definitely, like, I wanted to talk about in-person versus online and pairing that with attachment style, but now that you bring it up, like, when I was dating online, I would meet somebody and I'm like, I'm curious about this person.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would try to set the first date. Generally, it's coffee or something that doesn't involve alcohol. That doesn't work for me.
Solid choice.
Right? Alcohol numbs my intuition, which we were talking about a little bit too.
Yep.
And then after that first date, I become either interested or just like, okay, I'm no longer curious. And that's my check-in for me is like, do I want a second date? Am I interested? And that's kind of like a leveling up from curiosity to interested. And that's all that I take myself as like seriously as I need to be on a first date.
Right. That's all you need to know. I think even coming with that, going into a date with that intention takes the pressure off, right? I think so often people go into the first date as, I have to figure out if this person's the one. Well, first off, there is no the one. An outdated fairy tale concept that doesn't
Hollywood.
Actually exist and has been brainwashing us forever. And but it's so much pressure when you have to figure that out. You just want to figure out, like, this person okay to be around?
Yeah. Did I like him enough to see him again? That's it. And even on the second date, for me, that's really another place I want to be too. Is like, I cannot get to know somebody 2.5 hours on the first date, 2.5 hours on the second, and think that they're the one. That's pretty outlandish. When you know, but like, that's really your intuition tuning into your intentions. And then did you keep safe boundaries on that first one? And then are you allowing yourself to hear your intuition too?
Right. So here comes another rule. People are going to think I'm like this rule-based person.
Actually, those people listening are going to be like, Kristen and Dave are like, Kristen and Dave are like the exact same person because of all these rules that we have. But they're there to help us date better.
Yes. So my next rule is that a date should only be 2 hours.
Right?
When I hear about people having
10-hour
6-hour
dates?
drinks,
Oh,
I'm like, no, you did it wrong. Like, but we had such a great time. We just didn't want it to stop. I'm
like, because of that chemistry?
Right.
That's the familiar. That is like...
Yes. You should only really be checking it out.
Yeah.
Just checking it out. If you can spend that much time with a person already, that's a warning sign. You've slipped into old territory.
Or somebody's pretending to be somebody that they're not in order to get you to like them or to sleep with them.
Yes, fair. If you collapse the boundaries of time or personal space or physical space, right, your physical body, you cut out so much learning. Like, you need time, like you said, to simmer about it. Go, what was that like? Do I want a second date? That was interesting. I want to learn more about that. If you have a 6 to 10 hour date, your first, second,
there's no mystery
third,
anymore.
There's no mystery. and you've collapsed boundaries. Because then by the second date, you're having sex with them, and then you're collapsing intimacy boundaries. You've so much material and space that you've just collapsed, right? So you've just fallen into an old pattern. So if you really keep to those rules, you stretch it out.
Let me give you an example from my life. I don't do this very often, but I think a little bit of disclosure is a good thing. I do have intentions of, like, let's meet for coffee for the first time. Let's see if our lifestyles actually match up. Like, I don't want to go out for a drink the first date. I used to, and then it just never really ended up well because I couldn't quite see what I was looking for clearly enough. And then I'd go on a second date, and then there'd be drinks involved again. So,
and you never learn what the person's like without drinks involved.
There you go.
So you have to give yourself a chance, at least in the beginning.
So I'm trying to date better, and this is a comfortable place for me. This is safe for me. This is a good boundary for me. And I intend to have a 2-hour date. And recently I lost track of time. And 2.5 hours come, and I'm telling a story about my daughter, and I'm talking about a haircut. And I'm like, oh crap, it's 12:30. I have a haircut I need to be at, like, right now because I made an appointment. I live and die by my calendar and my schedule. And I literally, like, I gotta go. I think I can still make it. Can I walk you to your car? And literally, like, just, like, stopped mid-date at 2.5 hours because I'm like, oh crap, I lost track of time. I'm late for another appointment. It was a haircut, not another date, right? And that was a check-in for me. I'm like, Dave, why did you lose track of time? Were you that interested in the conversation? Something to be aware of, Dave. Like, I kept asking myself that a little bit later. Like, shoot, Dave, you don't generally miss an appointment if it's in your calendar.
Yeah.
Something to be conscious of there.
Yes, absolutely. It got away from you. You weren't being equally present with the experience and with your own boundaries, right? So there needs to be kind of an equal hovering, sort of like what therapists do when we're with clients. People say, how do you listen to, all these clients all day and like go from one to the other and like feel okay at the end of the day?
And not take it home with you,
not
right?
Take it
Yeah.
home. Well, the thing is, a lot of schooling and a lot of practice at equally hovering, right? We're equally hovering in the client's emotional space as well as our own personal space. We have our own boundaries. So when we wrap up the session and the person goes, we haven't like lost ourselves or taken home them, right? And the same is true with a date. Like there needs to be an equal hovering of like having an awareness, not losing awareness with oneself and one's boundaries or goals or intentions, and being present. So yeah, it seems like you might have lost the present awareness of your own needs in that.
It wasn't that big of a deal. Thankfully, it was just a haircut, so I didn't beat myself up too bad about it.
The end of the world.
It really wasn't. And we went out again, so it wasn't at the end of the world that I just like stopped it short. Oh shoot, I'm late for another appointment.
Right.
I have to get my haircut, But I did find myself being more present while there with another person and respecting their time and valuing them as a person.
Right.
And before we like go deep into my own personal life, we were going to talk about avoidant and then secure when they get together, and why that's good for the avoidant attachment style.
Yeah, because it sort of like allows them to have a titrated experience of what it's like to be close to someone and feel okay and not feel like, and at first the avoidantly attached person is going to feel like, uh-oh, maybe they're going to get too close, uh-oh. But the secure, they know when to kind of back off because they need their own space too. So they're going to kind of equally hover in that space, like a little bit closeness, a little bit of distance. I need my personal time. So it actually helps in some ways kind of train the avoidantly attached person to be okay with closeness again and knowing that they'll get their needs met for distance as well, right? So it's the perfect pairing. I mean, anyone who has an insecure attachment, either avoidant or anxious, should intentionally want to date someone who's more secure. You will gain more from their ability to be secure in that relationship. You'll get your needs met. That's not always possible.
Right, because we're not always conscious of what that looks like.
Yes.
From our anxious point of view or from our avoidant point of view as well. We might be so much in our world that we don't recognize what's external from us.
Right, and what I hear sometimes from clients is that avoidantly attached people can sometimes appear secure in the beginning, right? They're really present and consistent with contact and okay with closeness until that 2-3 month mark where they suddenly are like, my needs for distance aren't being met. I need that, and they
all of a sudden
away.
too. Yeah.
Right. It feels like a very abrupt shift, and they're like, "But wait a minute, this person was meeting my needs. It felt secure. I thought I was reading all the signs right." And there usually were longer dates. Like there were little cues along the way, little pebbles that they could have followed. But sometimes you don't know until that 2 or 3 month mark how someone's going to deal with the vulnerability of actually getting close. Like, it's a time in the relationship, like, are we together? Like, is this a thing we're doing? It's not just, like, dating anymore. Like, you're starting to form a relationship, some commitment to the person, and that's usually where you'll see things fall apart. So I would say, like, don't get too committed until you figure out where you're at with that.
There's no rush whatsoever.
No.
And when we do rush, that's when we kind of, like, trip over ourselves or fall into an attachment that's not the best situation for us.
Right. If you notice yourself rushing in any way, that's a flag. Like, why am I feeling like I need to rush? Why might they be feeling that they need to rush this? Like, if you're rushing through anything in life, there's something you're trying to avoid, right? So you just need to check in with yourself. What are you trying to avoid? You're trying to avoid things falling apart? You getting too close? Like, what is that? And how might rushing things not actually, it's not an effective strategy.
Yeah, serve yourself or serve others, yeah.
Right, and like I talk a lot about like what's helpful or not helpful. That's not a helpful strategy. It's not going to like end in disaster. It might.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
It's not very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Totally. So if somebody loves your message and wants to learn more, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you? And what do you have coming up in the next few weeks or months to involve people?
Yeah, so we have a couple of groups. They're ongoing therapy groups. One of them is called Transforming Trauma. That is for female-identified survivors of abuse or sexual assault or intimate partner violence. And it's forming right now, so if you're interested, give us a call. It's also going to be an ongoing group, so depending on when you hear this, we'll have spots open up and you can come in. And then I run a divorce recovery group for women. It's an ongoing group. I've been running it for 5 years now. It's a highlight of my week. And it's for women considering moving through or recovering from divorce even 5 years later. You know, you could still be stuck in a
Yeah, they could all be on their own different timeline.
Right, and that's okay. Like, the diversity of experience actually adds to the group. And if you want to be in one of the groups or are interested in working with us individually or just reading where we blog every week, so lots of information on attachment and dating and relationships, you can go to our website, which is centerforsharedinsight.com. You can follow us on social media, centerforsharedinsight.com on social on Facebook and social media, Instagram and LinkedIn.
Awesome.
So, I think we're actually in Twitter now too. I think we just made that.
The Twitter sphere is but unbeknownst to me.
It was for a while, but we're now, I think, on Twitter. So.
And if there's one thing in the next couple of minutes that we didn't touch on that you want to expand on, we briefly covered, what would that be that you really want us to take away from today?
That attachment style is not fixed. It's something that can be transformed. I myself, you, like, we know that if you do the work, you can change your attachment style and find more secure relationships and actually get your needs met. It takes some work, but there's people out there to help you through that. So I think that's the exciting, rewarding part of my job is like, no, there's a way out. You can create the relationships you want. You're not predestined to have unhealthy relationships like others in your life.
The only way out is through.
Oh, yes.
And to face that shadow that
Yes.
none of us really want to address until we need to. And oftentimes rock bottom is a great motivator for us to get out of our own way and ask for help.
Right. Those patterns, if you're seeing one, like dating, marrying the same person over and over with the same name or different name.
Yeah.
Same person, different name.
Yep.
That's time.
I wasn't satisfied with my life, and I decided to do something about it. And that right there is why we address mental health through relationships, because that's where we see so many patterns arise.
Right.
And that's why the podcast is the way that it is.
Yeah.
We could have chosen fitness and nutrition for mental health, but we would not have been able to reach as many people without addressing relationships first.
Right.
And then finding what's underneath. And then I came across attachment theory.
Yep.
And absolutely just love the simplicity and the digestible nature of what we talked about today, and we could spend 3 or 4 more episodes on it.
Yeah. Well,
So.
and that's the thing, is that you may not even know that you have one attachment style or the other. You might be feeling depressed in relationship to your relationships. You might be feeling anxious or socially anxious. And those might be other cues to you that something is going on that might be limiting your future relationships, even with friends, with partners, with coworkers. It affects all kinds of relationships. So when you're noticing that you're having this ongoing struggle where relationships in general are not functioning well for you, it might be time to really look at, like, how can you do it differently?
And you're not alone, and there are people that can help.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's always my recommendation that we find somebody who can help.
Yes. And the thing is that, you know, I love what I do, and I hope I can help. And there's 2 therapists on our staff that are equally as skilled in attachment therapy and dating and divorce. But you know what? We're not the right fit for everyone. So if you're out there, like, you have tried a therapist, you're like, that didn't work, therapy's not for me, please call someone else. Call, so, like, even if you don't know where to start, call us.
Mm-hmm.
We will help you find a therapist. Like, I'm not as concerned about us getting your business, although I'd love to help you and work with you. I'm concerned about you getting the help you need. So, like, that's a part of our mission, is that we help the one person, they go out and help, they have healthier relationships with their partners, their children, their family members, their community, and then we're all functioning healthier, right? Like, this, I know it's a really idealistic vision for the world, but when we do the work with other people, and then we all get healthier.
That's right.
So
that's the mission of the podcast. You really just kind of summed it up.
Well, I'm glad.
That's why we're here. That's why we're talking. So I want to say thank you again. I know your time is really valuable.
Yeah, thanks.
And what do you say in the next 6 to 12 months we do follow up and we
Absolutely.
meet again and we have a conversation? I did love and enjoy meeting your team at the open house.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Keep me on the list for other events around town.
I will.
Okay.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yes.